The pain exploded in Nicholas Alderton's chest at 10:45 p.m., in the middle of a board meeting he had called because he didn't believe in normal business hours. It was a sharp, suffocating agony, as if an iron fist were squeezing the life from his heart. He gripped the edge of the polished mahogany table, a cold sweat instantly beading on his forehead. "Mr. Alderton?" someone asked, their voice sounding distant and distorted. He tried to respond, to issue a command, but no sound came out. The world tilted violently, the faces of his executives blurring into a kaleidoscope of panic. He was falling, and the last thing he registered before the darkness swallowed him whole was the look in their eyes. Not genuine concern for him, but a selfish fear of losing the man who signed their bonus checks. The bitter irony was his final conscious thought. He woke up to the irritatingly steady beep of a heart monitor and the sterile scent of a hospital. Dr. Morrison, his physician for the last decade, a business relationship like all others, stood beside the bed, his expression more serious than Nicholas had ever seen it. "Myocardial infarction," the doctor said, his voice grim. "A heart attack. At 32, Nicholas. 32. How long until I can get back to the office?" It was Nicholas's first question. Dr. Morrison looked like he wanted to throw his clipboard at him. "You almost died. Your heart literally stopped for 47 seconds. If you hadn't been in a building with a defibrillator..." He didn't need to finish. "Chronic stress, no sleep, a life devoid of anything but work. Your body just presented you with the bill. You need to make radical changes, or the next one will kill you." Nicholas closed his eyes. Radical changes. He had built an entire empire on a foundation of relentless, punishing routine. How was he supposed to stop now? "I need you to stay here for observation for 2 weeks, Dr. Morrison continued. "Absolutely not," Nicholas shot back, already reaching to pull the senses from his chest. "Nicholas, be reasonable. I can rest at home, work from home. I am not staying in this depressing white box." The argument was brief and predictable. Nicholas was stubborn. Dr. Morrison was unyielding. Finally, they reached a compromise, one Nicholas hated instantly. "A private nurse," the doctor declared. 24-hour care in your apartment. She'll monitor your vitals, make sure you take your medication, and most importantly, stop you from working 18-hour days. I don't need a babysitter. You need someone to stop you from committing professional suicide, Dr. Morrison countered. "It's this, or I have you committed for medical observation. Your choice." Hating every second of it, Nicholas relented. "Fine. But she stays in the guest wing. She doesn't interfere with my routine, and she doesn't speak to me unless it's strictly necessary." 2 days later, Nicholas was back in his penthouse, a minimalist fortress of black, white, and gray, as cold and imposing as its owner. He was already in his home office, completely ignoring doctor's orders, when the doorbell chimed. He swung the door open, expecting a stern, middle-aged woman in crisp, silent scrubs. Instead, he found a young woman who couldn't be more than 24. She had a fiery red ponytail, honey-colored eyes that sparkled with an unnerving amount of enthusiasm, and a smile so wide it seemed to take up her whole face. And she was carrying, Nicholas narrowed his eyes, a plant. "Hi," she chirped, stepping inside without an invitation. "You must be Nicholas. I'm Hazel Collins, your nurse for the next 30 days. She was already talking a mile a minute. "Wow, your place is gorgeous, but a little sad, isn't it? No color. I brought you a succulent. They're great for indoor environments, and are you okay? You look a little pale." Nicholas stared at this woman, this girl, who had just invaded his sanctuary with her irritating energy and a ridiculous plant. "I am going to kill Dr. Morrison." "Rules," Nicholas said, his voice as sharp and cold as a scalpel. Hazel had just finished stashing her suitcase, a suitcase covered in puppy dog stickers of all things, in the guest room. "First," he began, ticking them off like a hostile CEO, "you do not speak to me unless it concerns my immediate health. Second, you do not touch or reorganize anything in my apartment. Third, you do not interfere with my work. And fourth, you maintain a professional distance. We are not friends. Understood? Hazel listened, that infuriatingly bright smile never leaving her face. When he finished, she tilted her head. No, she said simply. Nicholas blinked. I'm sorry? No, she repeated cheerfully. Those rules are ridiculous and completely counterproductive to your recovery. Social isolation worsens stress, and communication is key. And frankly, she took a step closer, and he instinctively took a step back. You need a friend, Mr. Alderton. You desperately need one. The first few days were a cold war. Nicholas tried to ignore her, to bury himself in spreadsheets and conference calls, to treat her as an annoying piece of furniture. But Hazel was impossible to ignore. She hummed while she made coffee, and her coffee was, inexplicably, far better than his own. She put colorful, handwritten sticky notes on his pill bottles. Take me at 9 a.m. The smiley face was a particular offense. She asked about his meetings, what he was eating, how much he'd slept. 4 hours, he answered curtly one morning. 4. Nicholas. She was already using his first name, without permission. Your heart needs to rest. My heart needs my company not to collapse while I'm sidelined, he retorted. Your company will survive, she said, her tone softening with a genuine concern that disarmed him. You, on the other hand, might not if you keep this up. No one spoke to him like that. No one cared enough to. The breaking point came one night when he was still in his office at 1 a.m. She appeared in the doorway, wearing flannel pajamas covered in a pattern of cartoon sheep that was so absurd he almost laughed. You promised, Dr. Morrison. I promised nothing. Nicholas. She walked in and sat in the chair opposite him, uninvited. Why do you do this to yourself? Do what? He asked, his voice tight with irritation. Work like the world will end if you stop for a second. Live in this beautiful but empty apartment. There are no photos, no personal touches. Well, there's one plant now. Nothing that says a human being actually lives here. He stiffened. That's none of your business. It is, she insisted gently, because loneliness is just as deadly as stress. And you, Nicholas Alderton, are the loneliest man I have ever met. The raw truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He wanted to be angry, to throw her out. But something in her kind, honey-colored eyes, in her unwavering concern, cracked a wall inside him he hadn't known was there. You don't know me, he said. But the words sounded weak, even to his own ears. Then let me, she replied softly. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Nicholas considered it. It was 3 a.m. when a sound from the kitchen woke Nicholas. His heart gave a familiar panicked lurch, a phantom pain from the heart attack, before he remembered. Hazel. He found her in the sleek, dark kitchen, her fiery ponytail a messy halo under the soft under-cabinet lighting. She was making hot chocolate. Couldn't sleep, she explained with a small, sheepish smile. You? I never sleep well, he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. He found himself sliding onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island, a place he usually only used for signing documents. Since the heart attack? Or since always? She asked, her question casual but perceptive. He hesitated, then the words came, spilling into the quiet intimacy of the late-night kitchen. Since always. Since I was 12 and I'd wake up to the sound of my parents screaming at each other. And just like that, over 2 mugs of surprisingly good hot chocolate, the dam broke. He told her everything. He spoke of the constant bitter fighting, of slammed doors and broken plates and accusations that poisoned the air. He told her about the day he came home from school to find his mother's closet half empty. I was 12, he said, his voice low, devoid of emotion. She was just gone. No note, no goodbye. My father was in his study, drunk. He just looked at me and said, she chose her freedom over us. Then he went back to his paperwork. Hazel listened in complete silence, her eyes shining with unshed tears, but she didn't interrupt. My father, Robert. He raised me after that. If you can call it raising, Nicholas continued with a bitter laugh. He taught me that emotions are a liability, that love is an illusion women use to get money, that marriage is a prison. He turned his pain into a business lesson, and I was a very good student. So that's why you don't believe in love, Hazel said softly. It wasn't a question. Love doesn't exist, Nicholas corrected, the old, cynical mantra automatic on his tongue. There's convenience, physical attraction, maybe partnership. But romantic love? That's a fairy tale they sell to naive people. Hazel set her mug down on the counter and looked at him, her gaze so intense it startled him. You're wrong. Hazel, no, listen to me, she insisted, her voice firm but gentle. What your parents had wasn't love. It was toxic. It was resentment. It was two people who never should have been together trying to force something that wasn't there. But that isn't what love is. She leaned forward, her eyes pleading with him to understand. Love is a choice you make every day. It's caring for someone even when it's hard. It's vulnerability and partnership. It's finding that one person who sees you, really sees you, with all your flaws, and chooses to stay anyway. You're too young to be so naive, he said, but there was no bite in his words. And you're too young to be so cynical, she shot back. Your parents broke you, Nicholas, but broken doesn't mean irreparable. Something about the way she said it, with such absolute conviction, as if he were a treasure worth fixing, made his chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with his damaged heart. In the days that followed, something shifted. Nicholas still worked, but he took the breaks Hazel insisted on. They ate meals together. She cooked, and he discovered that food prepared with care tasted different. They talked. She told him about nursing school, about patients who had changed her life. He told her about building his company from scratch, about the thrill of his first major acquisition. Slowly, imperceptibly, his cold, empty apartment began to feel like a home. There were flowers on the table. There was laughter in the air. There was life. One afternoon, Hazel came to take his blood pressure, a routine procedure. But as her fingers rested on his wrist, counting the beats, she frowned. Your heart rate is elevated. I'm fine, he said quickly. Too quickly. Nicholas, this is serious. If you're having symptoms, I'm not sick. He captured her hand, his fingers closing over hers where they rested on his pulse point. He held her gaze, the air between them suddenly electric. It's elevated because you're close to me. Her honey-colored eyes widened. The clinical moment shattered, replaced by something raw and undeniable. She was close, too close. She should have pulled away. She didn't. Hazel snatched her hand back as if she'd been burned. I need to check your medication schedule, she stammered, fleeing the living room with a speed that was anything but professional. Nicholas was left alone, his heart still hammering in his chest, not from a medical condition, but from her. For weeks, he had told himself this was just a professional arrangement, that the warmth he felt when she smiled was simple gratitude, that the ease he felt in her presence was just a side effect of his recovery. Lies, all of it. He was attracted to her in a way he hadn't allowed himself to be attracted to anyone in years, and it terrified him. The next few days were an awkward, clumsy dance of proximity and avoidance. Hazel tried to retreat back into a shell of professionalism, checking his vitals with a clinical efficiency, avoiding his gaze, and pulling away whenever they accidentally brushed past each other in the kitchen. Nicholas, for his part, tried to respect the boundary she was drawing, but he found himself constantly failing. He'd watch her when she wasn't looking, memorizing the way she bit her lip when she was concentrating on her notes, or the way she hummed softly to herself while she cooked. He even caught her talking to the plants she'd brought into his sterile apartment, encouraging them to grow. It was absurd, and yet it made him feel something dangerously close to fondness. One evening, they collided in the kitchen, both reaching for the refrigerator at the same time. His hands shot out instinctively, closing around her waist to steady her. They froze, trapped in a moment that stretched far beyond polite necessity. Her scent, something clean and fresh, like citrus and sunshine, filled his senses. "Sorry," he murmured, his voice husky, but he didn't let go. "It's okay," she whispered, but she didn't move away. The tension was a palpable, suffocating, and utterly delicious thing. "Can we talk about this?" Hazel finally asked, her voice barely audible as she took a small step back, breaking the spell. Nicholas felt the loss of contact like a physical blow. "About what?" he asked, knowing full well what she meant. "About this," she said, gesturing vaguely between them. "What's happening here?" His walls shot up, a lifetime of self-preservation kicking in. "Nothing is happening," he said, his voice turning cold and distant. "You are my nurse. I am your patient. There are professional boundaries. Boundaries you crossed when you told me your heart races when I'm near," she shot back, her frustration finally bubbling to the surface. She was right, damn it. "That was a mistake," he said, hating the lie, hating himself for hurting her. "I shouldn't have said it." "But you did," she insisted, her honey-colored eyes flashing with a challenge. "And you can't take it back. What do you want from me, Nicholas?" "Everything," a voice screamed inside his head. "I want everything you're willing to give." But what he said was, "I want you to continue doing your job, nothing more." The hurt that flashed across her face was a physical knife to his chest. "Right," she said, her voice suddenly brittle. "Professionalism. Got it." She turned and walked to the guest wing, closing the door behind her. She didn't slam it. She was too gentle for that. But the soft, final click was somehow worse. Nicholas didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation, hating himself for pushing her away, and hating himself even more for how much it mattered. Around 4 a.m., he gave up and went to the living room. A single lamp was on. Hazel was curled up on the sofa, staring intently at a photo on her phone. She didn't hear him approach. He was about to speak when he saw the glint of tears on her cheeks. She was crying, silent tears tracking down her face as she stared at the screen. He had never seen her cry. Without thinking, he moved closer. "Hazel?" She jumped, quickly wiping at her face. "Nicholas, I didn't hear you. What's wrong? Why are you crying?" "It's nothing. I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar," he said softly, sitting on the edge of the coffee table opposite her. "Please, talk to me." She hesitated, then slowly, she turned the phone toward him. The screen showed an old photo of her. She was younger, beaming, her hand resting on a proudly swollen, pregnant belly. And Nicholas understood. There was a story here, a painful one. "Who was she?" he asked gently, his voice barely a whisper. "Who I used to be," Hazel whispered back. "Before everything fell apart." "I was married," Hazel began, her voice small and fragile, a stark contrast to her usual bright energy. "I married my college sweetheart at 19. His name was Ryan, and he was everything I thought I wanted. Charming, attentive, and he said all the right things. I was naive enough to believe in fairy tales." Nicholas listened in silence, an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. "I thought love conquered all," she continued with a sad, self-deprecating smile. "And when I found out I was pregnant 6 months after the wedding," her eyes glistened with the memory, "I thought I was living the dream. We were going to be a family." She told him everything, how Ryan had changed after the wedding. The late nights at work, the secret phone calls, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers, all the red flags she had willfully ignored because she was so desperate for her fairy tale to be real. "I was 6 months pregnant when I found out for sure," she said, her voice hollow. "I was coming home early from a doctor's appointment. We had just learned it was a girl, and I was so excited to tell him. And I found him, in our bed, with her." The pain in her voice was so raw it was physical. Nicholas felt a surge of violent, protective anger toward a man he had never met. "What happened?" he asked, his own voice tight. I screamed. He screamed back. He told me I was obsessed with the pregnancy, that he needed attention I wasn't giving him anymore. He blamed me for his betrayal. She took a shuddering breath. I got in my car and just drove, crying so hard I could barely see. And then the pain started, this horrible, cramping pain. She looked at him, her eyes empty. I went to the hospital. Placental abruption, they said, caused by extreme stress. They tried to save her, but she didn't need to finish. I lost my daughter that day, Hazel whispered into the silent pre-dawn apartment. Her name was going to be Sophie. I lost my marriage, my illusion of perfect love, and my baby, all in a single afternoon. I was 19 years old, and my world had ended. Nicholas was speechless. What could anyone possibly say to that? Hazel, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. No one does. I don't talk about it. She finally looked at him, her gaze clear despite the tears. But you deserve to know why I'm like this, why I still believe in love even after all that. How? Nicholas asked, the question genuine, his cynicism warring with his awe of her. How are you not the most bitter person on the planet? How can you still smile and care for people and believe in fairy tales after that? Hazel considered the question, a thoughtful look replacing the pain in her eyes. Because choosing to be bitter would be letting him win. It would mean letting that one awful day define the rest of my life. And I refuse. She reached out, her small hand covering his. Sophie was real. The love I had for her was real. And even though it ended in tragedy, it was worth it. She looked him straight in the eye. You think love is an illusion because your parents hurt you. I think love is a miracle because my daughter taught me it was possible, even for a short time. You're incredible, Nicholas said, his voice hoarse. Absolutely extraordinary. I'm broken, she corrected softly. But you said it yourself once. Broken doesn't mean irreparable. She was using his own words, turning his cynical worldview on its head. He didn't think. He just acted. He pulled her into a hug, and after a second of resistance, she melted against him, her body shaking with years of repressed grief. He held her, his hand rubbing soothing circles on her back, murmuring her name like a prayer. When she finally pulled away, her eyes were red, but she was smiling, a watery, fragile smile. There were only inches between them. His gaze dropped to her lips. Hers did the same. Nicholas, she whispered. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. He closed the distance. The kiss was soft, tentative, and loaded with weeks of unspoken tension and newly shared vulnerability. It was a question and an answer all at once. When they broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I don't know how to do this, he admitted, his voice raw with a terrifying honesty. Relationships, feelings. I was trained my whole life to avoid them. Then we'll figure it out together, Hazel whispered, echoing his words from weeks ago. One day at a time. But as they retreated to their separate rooms for the night, still separate for now, neither of them slept. They had crossed a line, and there was no going back. Everything changed after that night. Not in a grand, dramatic fashion, but in a series of small, seismic shifts. The space between them was no longer charged with unresolved tension, but with a quiet, tender intimacy. Nicholas found himself touching her more, a hand on the small of her back as he passed, his fingers brushing hers when she handed him his morning medication, a hug that lingered just a second too long. Hazel's smiles became smaller, more private, reserved just for him. They still slept in their separate rooms, a last, flimsy pretense of professionalism that they both knew was a lie. But their dinners grew longer, their conversations deeper, and when they looked at each other, there was a silent, shared promise of something they both desperately wanted but were still too afraid to name. A week after the kiss, Dr. Morrison came for a follow-up visit. He checked Nicholas's blood pressure, reviewed the meticulous logs Hazel kept, and finally, a broad, genuine smile broke across his face. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, he said, looking from Nicholas to Hazel. Your pressure is perfect, heart rate is stable, and you even look like you're getting some real sleep. It's Hazel, Nicholas said simply, his gaze finding hers across the room. She's good at her job. Clearly, Doctor, Morrison replied, but there was a knowing twinkle in his eye that made Hazel blush. After the doctor left, Nicholas found her in the kitchen, tidying up. The air was thick with an unspoken question. So, he began, leaning against the counter, I'm officially not dying anymore. You were never dying, she corrected softly. You were just... paused. And now? He asked. And now, she said, her voice hesitant as she turned to face him, you have to keep taking care of yourself. Which means... She trailed off. Which means I don't need a 24-hour nurse anymore, Nicholas finished for her, his heart sinking with a sudden, unexpected dread. Technically, no, she admitted, her eyes dropping to the floor. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Do you want me to leave? She finally asked, her voice small, her vulnerability a stark contrast to her usual bright confidence. No, he answered immediately, the word torn from him. He took a step closer. But I can't ask you to stay on as my nurse when I don't need one. It would be... selfish, unfair, she supplied. Wrong, he finished. Then ask me to stay as something else, she said, her voice suddenly bold, her eyes lifting to meet his. Nicholas stared at her, his mind racing. As what? As the person you like having around, she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. As the person who makes you laugh. As the person who is completely, terrifyingly, falling in love with you and doesn't want to go anywhere. The confession hung in the air between them, shimmering and brave. Nicholas felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. He wanted to run. Every cynical, self-protective instinct he had ever learned was screaming at him to retreat, to put the walls back up, to not risk the pain he knew love inevitably brought. But then he looked at her. Hazel, who had been betrayed in the worst way imaginable, who had lost a child, and who was still standing here choosing to believe in love, choosing to risk her heart on him. And he realized with a sudden, clarifying shame that he was the coward in the room. I don't know if I can be what you need, he said, the admission raw and honest. I don't know how to love someone. My father... Your father was wrong, she interrupted, her voice fierce. About everything. She closed the distance between them, her presence a warm, steady flame. Love isn't a weakness, Nicholas. It's the bravest thing you can do. And you don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to be willing to try. He didn't have a response. He only had an action. He pulled her to him and kissed her. Not the tentative, questioning kiss from before, but a deep, hungry, desperate kiss, filled with weeks of repressed desire and a terrifying, exhilarating hope. When they finally broke apart, he whispered against her lips, Stay. Not as my nurse. Not as a guest. Just stay with me. For real. Yes, she breathed, her answer immediate and absolute. That night, for the first time, they didn't retreat to their separate rooms. And as Nicholas fell asleep with Hazel curled in his arms, her soft breathing a steady rhythm against his chest, he had a startling thought. Maybe love isn't an illusion. Maybe it's this. But the next morning, reality came crashing in with a phone call. It was Jennifer, his assistant. Mr. Alderton, your father is on his way up. He insisted on seeing you. He said it was urgent. Nicholas went rigid. Robert. Of course. The man hadn't shown his face in months, and he chose now. Tell him I'm busy. I tried, sir, Jennifer said, her voice strained. He's already in the elevator. Nicholas hung up, a cold knot of dread tightening in his stomach. Hazel saw the change in him instantly. What is it? My father, he said, his voice grim. He's coming here. It's okay, she said, squeezing his hand. "I'm here." But when the doorbell chimed 20 minutes later, and Nicholas opened it to reveal Robert Alderton, a man who was an older, colder, harder version of himself, Hazel knew with a sickening certainty that it was not going to be okay at all. "Father," Nicholas said, his voice a carefully constructed wall of neutrality. Robert Alderton swept into the apartment without an invitation, his sharp, critical eyes scanning the space. He immediately noticed the changes, the vibrant green of the plants, the colorful throw pillows on the sofa, the general, comfortable messiness of a life being lived. "You've redecorated," he commented, his tone laced with disapproval. "It's different." "Hazel brought a few things," Nicholas explained, his body tensing. It was only then that Robert's gaze finally landed on her. She was standing near the kitchen, feeling like an intruder in what had, just moments before, felt like her home. His eyes narrowed. "And who is Hazel?" The insinuation in his voice was immediate and insulting. "My nurse," Nicholas stated, the lie feeling bitter on his tongue. "After the heart attack." "Ah, yes, the heart attack," Robert said, settling into Nicholas's favorite armchair as if he owned it. "The reason I'm here, to make sure you haven't decided to die and let the empire I built for you crumble." The visit was a disaster from the start. Robert interrogated Nicholas about the business, deals he'd missed, meetings he'd delegated, decisions made in his absence. Every question was a thinly veiled accusation of weakness. "I had a heart attack, Father. I almost died. And whose fault is that?" Robert retorted coldly. "I taught you better. Stress management. Discipline. You taught me to be a workaholic with no personal life," Nicholas shot back, a new, defiant anger rising in him. "Look where it got me." Robert seemed surprised by his son's backbone. His gaze flickered to Hazel, who was trying to make herself invisible. "It's her, isn't it?" he said, the word her dripping with disdain. "The nurse. She's putting soft ideas in your head." "She's keeping me alive," Nicholas corrected, his voice dangerously low. "She's taking care of me in ways you never did." "Care?" Robert laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "I made you a billionaire. I gave you the tools to conquer the world. Care is a luxury weak men afford themselves." Hazel couldn't stay silent any longer. "With all due respect, Mr. Alderton, you're wrong." Absolute silence. No one spoke to Robert Alderton that way. "Excuse me?" he said, turning his full, icy attention on her. "Your son almost died because he learned from you that feelings are a weakness and that human connection doesn't matter," she said, her voice shaking but firm. She took a brave, foolish step forward. "You may have given him business tools, but you took away the most important tool of all, the ability to be human." Robert rose to his feet, a towering pillar of indignation. "And who do you think you are?" "I'm someone who loves your son," Hazel said simply, "for who he is. Not because he's a CEO or because he builds empires, just because he's Nicholas, and you should try it sometime." Nicholas was speechless. Robert was apoplectic. "Nicholas," Robert said, his voice dangerously quiet. "A word, in private." They disappeared into the office. Hazel waited, her heart pounding. She heard raised voices. She heard the sound of something shattering. 20 minutes later, Nicholas emerged, his face a tight mask of controlled fury. "He's gone." "What happened?" He didn't answer. He just pulled her into a fierce, desperate hug. "I chose you," he whispered into her hair. "I chose us," and he didn't like it. But Robert Alderton wasn't a man who accepted defeat. 2 days later, Hazel was at the grocery store when he, coincidentally, appeared beside her in the produce aisle. "Miss Collins," he said, his tone now smooth and manipulative. "A word?" He bought her a coffee at the cafe next door. "You seem like a good girl, Hazel. Genuine." "Thank you," she said, wary. "Which is why I'm warning you," he continued, leaning forward. "You are going to destroy my son." "I love Nicholas." "I know," he interrupted, "and that's the problem. My son was bred for a certain kind of life, a certain kind of woman. A woman from his world, who understands the demands, the expectations. You, my dear, with all your good intentions, are out of your depth. His words were calm, reasonable, and utterly devastating. You will hold him back. He will be forced to choose between his legacy and you. And that conflict will ruin him. He placed his business card on the table. When you realize I'm right, and you will, call me. I will help you exit his life gracefully. I'll even compensate you for your time. Hazel pushed the card back across the table. Go to hell, she said, her voice trembling. She walked out, but his words followed her, a toxic poison seeping into her oldest, deepest insecurities. Out of your depth. You will ruin him. You don't belong. And Hazel, who had been broken once before by a man who told her she wasn't enough, began to believe him. Hazel didn't tell Nicholas about the conversation with his father. She should have. But the words were stuck in her throat, tangled up with all the old, familiar insecurities she thought she had conquered. You're not good enough. You're out of your depth. She looked at Nicholas's life. The multi-million-dollar apartment, the meetings with world leaders, the casual decisions that affected thousands of lives. And then she looked at herself. A 24-year-old nurse with a messy past and an uncertain future. For the first time since she'd fallen in love with him, she truly questioned if Robert was right. In the days that followed, a subtle distance grew between them. It wasn't obvious. She still smiled. She still cared for him. She still slept in his arms at night. But her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. Her touch was hesitant. Nicholas noticed immediately. Is everything okay? He asked one evening as they ate dinner. Of course, she lied, forcing a brightness she didn't feel. Just tired. But it wasn't fatigue. It was fear. Fear that she was an imposter in his life. Fear that she was a liability he would eventually come to resent. Fear that her love, which felt so pure and real, wasn't enough to bridge the chasm between their worlds. She started noticing things she had previously ignored. The skeptical way Nicholas's few friends looked at her, the polite but cold efficiency of his assistant, Jennifer. A tabloid headline showing Nicholas at a charity gala months ago, his arm around a stunning, elegant woman who was clearly, effortlessly, from his world. The breaking point came in the form of an invitation. Nicholas had to attend a major philanthropic gala, his first public appearance since the heart attack. Come with me, he said, his eyes full of a hopeful excitement. I don't know, Nicholas, she demurred. I don't have anything to wear to something like that. I'll buy you anything you want, he offered easily. No, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. I don't want to be your charity project. The words, born of her own insecurity, landed like a slap. He recoiled, his expression wounded. Hazel, what is going on with you? Nothing, she insisted. Just, you should go alone. It will be easier. Easier for who? He asked, his voice tight with frustration. For both of us, she thought, but didn't say. He went to the gala alone. Hazel spent the night torturing herself, scrolling through photos of the event as they were posted online. There he was, impossibly handsome in a tuxedo, surrounded by the beautiful, powerful people who populated his world. She imagined herself there, feeling small and out of place. Robert's words echoed in her head. You don't belong. When Nicholas came home late that night, he found her curled up on the sofa, crying. Hazel! I can't do this, she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a torrent of pain and fear. Do what? Talk to me. Us, she cried, finally looking at him. This! I'm not good enough for you, Nicholas. Who told you that? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet, though he already knew the answer. It was my father. He got to you, didn't he? Her silence was all the confirmation he needed. In a rare display of uncontrolled emotion, Nicholas slammed his fist against the wall, the sharp crack echoing in the silent room. That son of a... He's not wrong, she whispered, her voice breaking. Nicholas, look at your life. Now look at me. We don't make sense. We make perfect sense, he insisted, kneeling in front of her. I'll hold you back. You'll have to choose between me and your world, and eventually you'll grow to hate me for it. Never. I've been here before, she cried, standing now, her own history pouring out of her. I've been the girl who wasn't enough. Ryan told me. His mother told me. And now your father is telling me. And maybe, her voice cracked, maybe they're all right. Hazel, please. I need time, she said, backing away. I need to think. She fled to the guest room, a room they hadn't used in weeks, and locked the door. Nicholas stood outside, his forehead pressed against the cool wood. Don't let him win, he pleaded, his voice rough with desperation. Don't let his fear and my past destroy what we have. But inside the room, Hazel was already making a decision that she believed, with all her broken heart, was the only way to save the man she loved. It was a decision that would shatter them both. She took out a piece of paper and began to write. Dear Nicholas. Nicholas woke at dawn with a cold, heavy dread in the pit of his stomach. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying Hazel's heartbroken words. When he saw the guest room door standing open, a sliver of hope flickered within him. But the bed was perfectly made. Her suitcase was gone. Panic, sharp and absolute, seized him. Hazel, he called out, his voice echoing in the suddenly vast, empty apartment. He raced through the rooms, kitchen, living room, her bathroom. All empty. All traces of her were gone, except for the vibrant green plants she had brought into his monochrome world. Then he saw it. A single white envelope on the kitchen counter, his name written on it in her neat, familiar script. His hands trembled as he tore it open. Dear Nicholas, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. I'm sorry for the cowardice of not saying goodbye in person, but I knew you would convince me to stay, and that's a choice I can't let you make. These weeks with you have been the happiest I've been since I lost Sophie. You made me believe in love again. You made me feel seen and cherished and worthy, and I love you more than words can say. But your father is right. Our worlds are too different. I would be an anchor in your life, always out of place, always needing to be explained or defended in the circles you move in. You deserve a partner who complements your world, not one you have to constantly shield from it. More importantly, you deserve to live a life free from the conflict of choosing between love and legacy, and eventually, you would have to choose, and either choice would lead to resentment. I'm going back to my hometown for a while. I need space. Please take care of yourself, sleep, eat properly, take your medication, and water the plants. With all my love, and it will always be all my love, Hazel. He read the letter 3 times, each word a fresh cut. Then, something inside him snapped. The cold, calculating CEO he had been for a decade roared back to life, but this time his objective wasn't a corporate takeover. It was a rescue mission. He called Jennifer. Cancel everything today. But Mr. Alderton, the board meeting, everything. He paused, a frantic edge to his voice. And I need the personnel file for Hazel Collins. Now. He realized, with a fresh wave of self-loathing, that in all their intimate conversations, he had never once asked the name of her hometown. 20 minutes later, he had it. Asheville, North Carolina. The next flight wasn't for 2 hours. Too long. He grabbed his car keys. It was a 10-hour drive. Perfect. Time to think. Time to figure out how to save the only thing in his life that had ever truly mattered. An hour into the drive, he did something he had sworn he would never do again. He called his father. I have something to say, and you are going to listen, Nicholas said, cutting off Robert's surprised greeting. You were wrong. About everything. About love being a weakness. About emotions being a luxury, and most of all, about Hazel not being good enough. He took a deep, steadying breath. Hazel is the best person I have ever met. She saved me, not just from the heart attack, but from the empty, meaningless life you taught me to build. And if you can't see that, if you can't accept that I am choosing love over your bitter, lonely legacy, then you don't have to be my father anymore. Nicholas, I will always love you. "You're my father," he said, his voice cracking. "But I will not let your cynicism destroy my one chance at happiness. It's either Hazel, or it's no one." He hung up before Robert could reply. And for the first time in his life, he felt truly, completely free. He arrived in Asheville at 9 p.m., exhausted but wired with a singular purpose. The GPS led him to a modest, charming suburban house that was a world away from his Manhattan penthouse. The lights were on. He parked across the street, his heart hammering against his ribs. He saw her silhouette in the window, talking to an older woman. Even from a distance, he could see the slump in her shoulders, the sadness in her posture. He got out of the car and walked up the path. He knocked on the door. It was opened by an older woman with kind, tired eyes that were so much like Hazel's. "Can I help you?" "I'm Nicholas Alderton," he said, his voice hoarse from the long drive. "I'm looking for Hazel." Recognition and a hint of disapproval crossed the woman's face. "You, the rich one." "I'm the man who loves your daughter," he corrected, "and I just drove 10 hours to tell her that." The woman studied him for a long moment, then turned and called into the house. "Hazel, there's someone here for you." He heard footsteps, and then she was there, standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, her eyes red and swollen from crying. When she saw him, she froze, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. "Nicholas, what are you—" "We need to talk," he said, his voice raw with exhaustion and determination. "Now." "You shouldn't be here," Hazel whispered. But the words lacked conviction. She stood frozen on the porch, a ghost in her own home. "I read your letter," Nicholas said, stepping out of the car's headlights and into the dim glow of the porch light. "Then you understand why I understand that you're wrong." He cut her off, his voice firm. "Completely, utterly wrong." As if on cue, a low rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. A fat drop of rain hit the pavement, then another. Within seconds, a summer storm had broken, the thick, warm drops soaking them instantly. Neither of them moved. "Hazel, my father convinced you that you're not enough for my world," he began, his voice rising to be heard over the downpour. "But he's the one who isn't enough. He wasn't enough as a father when my mother left. He wasn't there when I had a heart attack. He has spent his entire life teaching me the wrong lessons, and I was a fool for believing him." The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, dripping from his chin, but he didn't seem to notice. "You said you'd be an obstacle, that our worlds don't fit. But Hazel—" He took a step closer. "You are my world. For the first time in my life, I haven't just been existing. I've been living. I've been laughing. I've been feeling. Nicholas. No. My turn." He closed the remaining distance, taking her cold hands in his. "You're afraid because Ryan made you feel worthless. Because my father reinforced that lie. But I've been with the suitable women, Hazel. The ones from my world, with the right pedigrees and the right last names. And you know what they all had in common?" She shook her head, mesmerized. "Not a single one of them ever made me feel half of what I feel with you. Not one of them ever truly saw me. Not one of them ever made me want to be a better man." They were inches apart now, their breath mingling in the rain-soaked air. "Hazel Collins," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I lived for 32 years believing that love was a weakness, that emotions were a liability, and that loneliness was safety." A tear mixed with the rain on his cheek. "And then you stormed into my apartment with your ridiculous plants and your impossible smile, and you shattered every wall I ever built." "But what if your father is right?" she whispered, her own tears now indistinguishable from the rain. "What if I hold you back? And what if you're the best thing that has ever happened to me, and I let my fear and my father's poison ruin it?" he countered fiercely. "What if we spend the rest of our lives wondering, what if? I don't want you to resent me." "Impossible," he breathed. I love you. I am in love with you. And maybe our worlds are different, but we'll build a new one. Together. Our world. Where it doesn't matter where we came from, only where we're going. And then he did the one thing she never expected. He dropped to one knee, right there, on the wet, muddy porch, in the middle of a thunderstorm. I don't have a ring, he said, his voice raw and desperate. I don't have a speech. But Hazel, marry me. Not for convenience, not for a contract, not for social standing. Marry me because you make me want to wake up in the morning. Marry me because your laughter is my favorite sound. Marry me because when I think about my future, all I can see is you. The only sound was the drumming of the rain. Hazel stared down at him. This powerful, brilliant, broken man, kneeling in the mud for her, his heart completely and utterly exposed. And she saw the truth. Not pity, not obligation, just love. Real, terrifying, life-changing love. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, a laugh bubbling up through her tears. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. He surged to his feet, pulling her into a kiss that was all rain and tears and years of pain finally washing away. When they broke apart, Hazel's mother, Margaret, was standing in the doorway crying happily. "You're both going to catch pneumonia," she said, but she was beaming. "Get inside. We have a lot to talk about." 3 days later, Nicholas and Hazel drove back to Manhattan. The silence in the car wasn't tense or awkward. It was a comfortable, shared peace. But as they approached the city, Nicholas took an unexpected exit. "Where are we going?" Hazel asked. "To settle a few accounts," he said, his jaw set with a quiet determination. He pulled up in front of the imposing glass tower of Alderton Holdings, Robert's office. He turned to her, his hand covering hers. "Together?" "Always," she replied, her heart swelling with love for the man he was becoming. Robert was surprised to see them, and even more surprised to see Hazel standing confidently by Nicholas's side. "Nicholas, Miss Collins." "It's Hazel," she corrected gently but firmly. "And soon, it will be Hazel Alderton." Robert blinked, the news clearly catching him off guard. "You're engaged." "We are," Nicholas confirmed, his voice leaving no room for argument. "And you will respect her, and you will respect us, or you will lose me for good." The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Robert stared at his son, then at the young woman who had so thoroughly dismantled his world. Finally, he let out a long, weary sigh, the sound of a man who had been carrying a heavy burden for too long. He looked older, tired. "I was wrong," he said, the words quiet and shocking. "About you, Hazel. About love being a weakness. About a lot of things." He looked at Nicholas, his eyes filled with a lifetime of regret. "When your mother left, it broke something in me. I poured all of that bitterness into you. I taught you never to feel because I couldn't handle my own feelings. And in the process, I almost killed you." His voice cracked. "I haven't been alone since she left. I've had arrangements, dates, but I never let anyone get close. Because if you don't love, you can't get hurt." He looked at Hazel, his expression one of dawning, painful realization. "But you can't be happy either. And watching you, Nicholas, seeing you genuinely happy for the first time since you were a boy." His voice broke completely. "I realized how badly I failed you. As a father, as a man." "Dad," Nicholas started, taking a step forward. "No, let me finish," Robert insisted. He turned his gaze fully on Hazel. "I told you that you weren't good enough for him. The truth is the other way around. My son wasn't good enough for you. You came into his life and did in a few weeks what I failed to do in 32 years. You taught him how to live. And I tried to destroy it because I was jealous." Tears, the first Nicholas had ever seen his father shed, streamed down Robert's face. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "I'm so sorry for almost ruining something so beautiful. All because I'm a bitter, cowardly old man. Hazel, her own eyes wet with tears, crossed the room and did something no one expected. She hugged Robert Alderton. He stood rigid for a moment, shocked, then slowly, hesitantly, his arms came up to return the embrace. "It's never too late to start over," she said softly. "It's not too late for you to find happiness either." In the months that followed, a new, tentative normal began to take shape. Hazel went back to work, not as a private nurse, but in the cardiac wing of a local hospital, where she felt fulfilled and purposeful. Nicholas learned to balance his work with his life, discovering that the world didn't end if he left the office at 6 p.m. They planned their wedding, a small, intimate affair in Asheville, with only the people who truly mattered. And during the planning, a strange and wonderful thing happened. Robert and Hazel's mother, Margaret, began to talk. It started with emails about flowers, then progressed to phone calls about other things. "I think your father is flirting with my mother," Hazel said one night, half amused, half horrified. Nicholas pulled her into his lap, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Good," he said, kissing her. "Everyone deserves a second chance at love." The wedding day arrived on a perfect autumn afternoon in Asheville. The air was crisp, the sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the leaves were a fiery tapestry of red and gold. The ceremony was held in the garden of Margaret's home, the same porch where Nicholas had proposed now serving as a makeshift altar. In a sunlit room, Hazel stood in a simple but stunningly elegant dress, her mother fussing over the final details. "Are you nervous, honey?" Margaret asked, her eyes misty. "No," Hazel replied, her voice filled with a calm, absolute certainty. "For the first time in my life, I'm not nervous at all." Across the house, Nicholas stood with Robert. "Are you sure, son?" Robert asked, his voice gruff with emotion. "I've never been more sure of anything," Nicholas said, and meant it. As the music began, Nicholas took his place, his heart pounding, and then he saw her. Walking down the aisle on her mother's arm, her smile so radiant it outshone the autumn sun. He felt tears well in his eyes, and for the first time he didn't try to hide them. When she reached him, Margaret kissed her daughter's cheek, then turned to Nicholas. "You take care of my treasure," she whispered. "With my life," he promised. Their vows, which they had written themselves, left not a dry eye in the small crowd. "You saved me," Nicholas said, his voice thick with emotion. "No," Hazel corrected softly, her hand in his. "We saved each other." And when the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," the kiss was met with cheers and happy tears. It was perfect. Later, at the small, intimate reception, Hazel slipped away for a moment. Nicholas found her standing by a window, looking at an old photo she kept in her wallet. The one of her, young and pregnant with Sophie. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. "I am," she said, a soft, wistful smile on her face. "I was just wishing she could be here, to see that her mom found happiness again." Nicholas wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "She knows," he whispered. "Wherever she is, she knows. And she's so proud of you." He paused. Then his hands moved to rest protectively on her stomach. "And she knows she's going to be a big sister." It took a second for his words to register. Hazel turned in his arms, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What?" "Nicholas, I'm not—" "You are," he said, his smile the brightest she had ever seen. "I found the pregnancy test in the trash this morning. I was waiting for the right moment to tell you I knew." She stared at him, speechless. Then a joyous, disbelieving laugh bubbled up from her chest. We're having a baby." "We're having a baby," he confirmed, his voice filled with a love so profound it was boundless. He pulled her into a kiss filled with all the promises of their new beginning. And as he held her, surrounded by their family, Nicholas Alderton finally understood. Love wasn't a fairy tale or an illusion. It was real. It was a choice you made every day. It was messy and chaotic and imperfect, and it was the only thing in the world that truly mattered. "I don't believe in love," the cold-hearted CEO had once said. But she had melted his heart anyway. And he and his world would never be the same.